Welcome to Frank Stajano Explains. Today's topic is the SR flip-flop. The SR flip-flop is the first sequential circuit that you see in your digital electronics textbook or course. You first do a bunch of logic gates and Boolean algebra and stuff with the so-called combinational logic part. And then you come to a stage where you do sequential logic, and the first sequential logic circuit you see is the SR flip-flop, also called SR latch by people who want to make a distinction on whether the thing is edge triggered or not, and want to call flip-flop when things that are edge triggered. We're not going to be worrying about that. Combinational means that the output of your circuit only depends on a combination of the inputs, whereas in the sequential circuit the output depends on the sequence of inputs that it has seen before, not just on the instantaneous value of the inputs. So this means that the circuit somehow remembers the sequence of things. It has happened to some extent, and the answer, the output, depends on the state. So where does the sequential circuit keep its state? Well, it keeps its state in some kind of memory elements, and the most basic memory element is precisely this SR flip-flop. And so this is introduced, it's often introduced in a way that looks a bit like this, a couple of crisscrossed AND gates, NAND gates or NOR gates, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, you can work out through the explanation and see that it does do what it claims to be doing, but there's no hint as to how anybody came up with this involved construction, and it gives you the feeling that they were smoking something strange when they came up with this idea. So the point of today's video is just to give an intuition about where this strange arrangement of gates comes from, and try to reconstruct it from first principles as if we were the ones inventing it. Our job is to build a memory element that can store 1 bit of information, and to build it out of the most fundamental gates, NOT, AND, and OR, and also with the rule that we can only take our output from the output of an existing gate, because of course we want this output to drive other things, so it cannot just be floating, it has to be driven by a gate. Okay. If I want to remember the previous bit I had in my circuit, if the bit is the output of a gate, then it would make sense to say, well, I'll loop this output back into an input, and so some combination of circuits will preserve that existing bit. And the easiest bit would be if I had a one input gate, like a NOT gate, but without the negation. If I had NOT without the negation, I would say, well, the output of that gate, I'll just feed it back to the input, and this remembers that bit, and I can take it as an output. So I don't have a single buffer gate. I could make it by putting 2 NOT gates, one after the other if I wanted, and I could feed the output of that into its own input, and this circuit remembers a bit, call it Q. I could make this out of AND gates or OR gates as well. For example, with an AND gate I could tie the 2 inputs of a 2-input AND gate together, and that would give me essentially the equivalent of a buffer, and I could also loop that back to itself, and again I have a circuit that remembers the bit that is in there. And the same I could do with an OR gate, obviously. Of course, all these circuits are a bit pointless because they remember what was in there, but there's no way for me to write anything in there. So if I wanted to write something, how could I do it? Well, if I forget about logic gates for a moment, I could imagine having a switch, and that switch would have a 0 or a 1 as its input, and the switch would basically let me select which of the 2 I'm putting as my output. And so clearly that is a memory, and I can set it to 0 or 1, but the problem with that is that to set it to 0 or 1, I have to have my finger pressing the switch to change between 0 and 1. And this input is outside the realm of the electronics, and I would like to have something that remembers the 0 and 1, but also can be written not by my finger, but by the output of some other gate. And to do that, I go back to the AND gate, for example, and instead of tying the two inputs together, I use one of the two inputs as a control. Because when I have an AND gate, if the input of the AND gate is to 1, then the output is going to be the same as the other input. But if the input of the AND gate is to 0, then whatever the other input is, then the output is going to be 0. So I can use one input of the AND gate to control the output, in the sense that I can have it either in a pass-through position when it's at 1, or in a reset the output to 0 when it's at 0. So whatever I have on my regular input, call it X, could be 1 or 0, if my control input is set to 0, then the output is going to be 0. If on the other hand my control input is at 1, then my output is going to be the same as my input, and so I call it pass-through. So with that I can feed the output back into the input, and here I get a circuit where if my control input is at 1, then the circuit remembers what was in there before, keeps going like this. And if instead my control input is at 0, then the circuit is at 0 and remembers a 0 from then on, even if I switch back the control input to the pass-through value of 1. So I've made myself a bit where I can reset the value to 0 if I like, or I can leave it whatever it was before. I can never bring it back to 1. That's a bit of a pain. It's a bit like having a bit represented by, let's say, a piece of card, like a ticket, and I can punch a hole into a little square or not. And so if there's a hole, then it's a 0, and if there is the paper that was there originally, it's a 1. So I start with the 1, and I can punch a hole, but I can never put the paper back. That's what this kind of circuit works like. And of course I can have the dual of that if I use an OR gate instead of an AND gate, in that will enable me to have a circuit that remembers what was there before, and I can make it into a 1 if I want to, but I can never go back to a 0. So both of these are basically half of the solution I'm seeking, and if I want the obvious thing, which is a bit that I can both set and reset, all I do is simply combine them, and I pipe them one into the other. And what I have now is a satisfactory circuit where if I set both of the control inputs to pass through, this one at 1 and this one at 0, then the bit that is in there, whatever it is remembered, because Q or 0 is still Q, Q and 1 is still Q, and so this Q keeps on circulating and can be taken out from here, or even from here if I wanted to, and that's fine. But if I want to set this Q to 1, then what I do is I go in this particular control input and I set this to 1, and then whatever the input was, this will become 1, it will circulate, and this 1 will continue to be remembered. Even when this one is reset down to 0, the 1 will continue to circulate. And if I want to set it to 0, then I set this control input to 0, and this will reset this output here. No matter what was here, this will be a 0, and then if this is in pass-through, then this 0 will continue to propagate, and I will have a 0 here on my output, or here if I wanted. And if I say both reset and set at the same time, that's obviously illegal. It makes no sense, and the one who wins is the one who does it second. So the one where I take my output, the one who did it last wins. So in this case that would be the set. If I took my output from here, the one who wins would be the reset, and I would be reading a 0. Anyway, so this is what I feel your textbook should have had in its picture of a most basic SR flip-flop, because that is very easy to understand. I can explain this to a smart 10-year-old, and even I would have understood it on first reading, whereas I scratched my head a long time when I was an undergraduate. Why does the textbook say this? Doesn't make any sense. And it took me a while to figure out an alternative like the one I'm showing you here. Now, the reason your textbook doesn't show this is because, as you probably know by now, these gates are elementary in the sense of Boolean algebra, but they're elementary in the sense of building them out to transistors. When you build the gates out to transistors, these are not the fundamentals. The fundamentals are the negated version, the NAND and the NOT, because in making the gate, you have this implicit inversion inside. And so to make the AND gate, you would need to have a NAND and then negate it afterwards. So this is less elementary than NAND. So the one in textbook is the one that's actually most elementary in terms of using up the fewest transistors. But it is perfectly equivalent, and we can transform one to the other using the wonders of Boolean algebra, and in particular the Morgan's law. So if I wanted to make all this out of NAND gates, for example, what would I do? I would insert some double negations. Double negations cancel out, so just as they cancel out, I can also put them back in. And if I insert a double negation between those two gates, then a double negation here would be this, for example. That's allowed. The only thing is it changes this Q to be the negation of Q at this point. And I could also add a double negation here. It's allowed. This would stay Q because double negation is before it rather than in the middle. And I could add a double negation here, like this. And if I do this, then this part of the circuit, because of the Morgan, this is not A or not B, all of it negated, is equal to AB. So I could replace the inside of this with a simple AND gate. So this thing here will be AND. And with the extra negation that I have here outside, was the second ball of the double negation, then this part here is a NAND gate. This one is a NAND gate because it's got its negation from the left one of the two balls I had in here. And this other negation out here will basically invert the meaning of these two, so that this is going to be 0 for a set and 1 for pass-through. Which in a sense is nice because it means that the pass-through is the same value in both of the control inputs. So these are active low control inputs that normally stay at 1, and when you want to set, you bring this one to 0. When you want to reset, you bring this one to 0. So I would write this by putting a bar over the symbol. So if I made a circuit, I wouldn't write the pass-through because it means do nothing. I would simply write reset with a bar over it. If I clean this up a little bit. So this is a circuit that you get after this basic cleanup, and it's a set-reset flip-flop made with just 2 NAND gates, so minimal number of transistors, and its inputs are active low. And it's exactly the same as you get in your textbook if you just rearrange it topologically. If I call this gate A, this gate B, and I redraw them, the gate A is the one with the Q output, and the B is the one with the negated output, and the output of the A gate is an input to the B gate, and the output of the B gate is an input to the A gate, and the other input of the A gate is the active low set input, and the other input of the B gate is the active low reset input. And this is the picture that didn't make sense that you have in a textbook, and that now makes a little more sense. and I can obviously put the double negations in at the other gate. In this case I have transformed the B gate from where it used to be OR to now NAND. If I instead transformed the B gate over here from being where it used to be AND, I make it into a NOR, then I have a NOR-NOR flip-flop which will have active high inputs set and reset, and that's how it works. So I hope this makes some sense and you enjoy this alternative explanation. It took me a while to figure it out when I was little. I don't claim any particular originality. In fact, I'm pleased to see that nowadays even Wikipedia has this type of diagram in explaining how an SR flip-flop works. I still wonder why I don't see it in more textbooks or introductory courses of digital electronics. I'm not lecturing digital electronics at Cambridge at the moment, but I do supervise a number of people, and that's what I use to explain it to them. If you enjoyed this video, stick a thumbs up on it, and for more stuff like this, check the other material on the channel and subscribe for the next ones I'm going to be producing. See you next time.